can explain what I want to say. So with Lucio and Antonello, we planned this, my talk, as a question, a big question. It's time that the light that Professor Klein and many others have shed on the east region of the Mediterranean can be produced also for the west that is in the dark. We know many things about the east: kings, women, horses, everything, tower and pharaohs. About the west we have just things. We have vessels, we have pottery, we have nuraghi and so on. It's time to try to explain this west part using what we know now. This is the question. And che c'ho in tasca? Qua sì. Ok. Sì. Probabilmente. May I speak in Italian? Or, okay. So I try to underline the points, the main points. So, and what can be the contribution of paleogenetics to this new? Because I am a pathologist, and come si fa ad andare avanti? Non va? Vabbè, faccio quello con questo. And I followed the evolution of paleopathologists for the beginning. As a fact, the Nobel Prize a few years ago. No, non va. E vabbè, faccio con questo. Okay. So I had the privilege to begin my work in 1973, and I was a pathologo del 1800, 19th century pathologist, because we had just the microscope and the morphology of tissue and cells were the guiding thing to understand the diseases. You can see here we began in 1996 with 90 with the PCR and so on, very simple things. And the paleogenomics began just a few years later and followed all this evolution, technological evolution. And things, wonderful things could be demonstrated. This is the second slide because 205 is not the first. Before, with PCR, they demonstrated many things. And the evolution found relevant things about anthropology, about the Neanderthal, the Denisovans, and so on. And as far as the technology is concerned, the principal issue is the samples, because the samples are very fragile. They cannot be conserved as easily as the human tissue that we studied. And the pre-analytic portion of the problem is very severe. The acidic environment can destroy the ancient DNA and so on. So strategies have been developed using this bone, using particular technology, and the PCR was substituted by new generation signaling and sequencing and so on. And important things could be demonstrated regarding the Neanderthal, the integration of portion of the genome of Neanderthal in the sapiens genome, And this had also a medical consequence, so that we studied not we as myself, but the communities demonstrated some small pieces of genome from Neanderthal to be relevant for now, for our diseases, such as COVID. So if you have this form of the gene, Neanderthal gene, this OS1, OS2, and so on, and you can go to the cemetery or you can survive, and very relevant. And evolution of these genes could help sapiens to survive to the different environment found in Europe. So that the medical relevance of ancient DNA studies it has been recognized as relevant, and the Nobel Prize was given in medicine and physiology. But the evolution of techniques is very, very quick, so that not only the bones can be studied, but also the environment where the things are found, and the SEDA techniques are developing and can provide to archaeologists a further complexity, because they are those who provide the samples, and if they are not correct, information is lost. And so this is the one review papers regarding the possibility to analyze the DNA of all the environment with the human DNA, but also vegetables and so on, animal and so on. So really important. The technique is very complex. The mitochondrial DNA was the first to be studied because it's several copies of DNA, the epsilon and so on, and the autosomal DNA with the analysis of millions of SNPs can provide very important information regarding the genome of population. So providing the possibility to define, as in isotope studies, this is from that part and so on, this man was coming from that genome, from the people and so on. And information can add some new ideas. So it was already known that from Africa sapiens went in the east of Europe and then spread, but now this paper demonstrated where it was precisely located, in the Iranian hub in the Altopiani, and stayed there 20,000 years. 20,000. A few thousand people went and amplified the population and stayed 20,000 years there, and then, like a big bang, spread to Europe till Australia and the Americas. And this can maybe explain why from east is lux. The light is always from east, because that was a terrible fire of ideas, of knowledge, of techniques. And so that part of the Europe continued to provide energy, cultural energy, but also was very dangerous because fightings and competition and so on. Then the well-known triple genotype with the WHG, the hunter-gatherers from Western, the Caucasian ones, the EEF, and the Yamnaya, the three position, and suggestion also provided regarding the as similar are to our phenotypes, and this terrible step Yamnaya killing everything, substituting the epsilon in Europe, and also some information regarding diseases again, so that they were have the persistency of the enzyme lactases, whereas the EF had intolerance to lactose, but also other genes such as the genetic signatures for hemochromatosis and so on. Then the problem of Indo-European languages following this step substitution of the EEF, that is the acronym of the farmers, that colonized the farmers for many years, all Europe, including Sardinia, Iberia, and all Europe. Then this substitution was gradual. In some places were total, in other was partial. In Sardinia, nothing happened regarding that. And another interesting information provided by the recent genomic studies was regarding the Etrusci. The Etrusci that were contaminated but steppe genome, but in a different way regarding all other peoples in Europe, they maintained the language, non-Indo-European. So a question is why this? Then the genomics somehow became an elephant in the crystal room. Why? Because they changed something very relevant that was in contrast with all the idea. So the famous Marcus paper regarding, no, this is Fernandez, the other one, demonstrating that the steppe component is not present in Sardinian people. And this was in the same year of the Marcus paper, demonstrating similar or identical things. So the number of samples were sufficient, and the three genomes are very easily understood with the Sardinian there. So, what can be useful if we trust on these results? We need more sample, surely. Genetics is very powerful. We have demonstrated in medicine, but has many problems to be solved. But the way is that. And these first results surely provide the necessity to change the vision of something. So first, the Sardinian people has been demonstrated to be the same genetically from the Bronze Age till now. This is against the idea, the possibility, I don't want to touch the Shardana issue, but one point that the anti-Shardana maybe from Lydia returned from the East, no, because if they are in Sardinia, they definitely has the same genome. So it is a minor point, but can be a good point. A second hit that is more severe to me is that this paper of last year, always again in a very prestigious journal, scientific journal, Punic people were genetically diverse with almost no Levantine ancestors. The samples are not so many, the issue is complex, but if we stop, it's not possible. In that year, the university and the journal discussed not for a long time this, and ancient DNA research challenges the belief about Phoenician Punic civilization, and ancient DNA, the cosmopolitan origin. Then this, come si dice, arrampicarsi sugli specchi. No, to understand how can be the Phoenician idea of West can be matched with these results, and also Van Dommelen is not a very good this picture of him. It was present in the paper. This interconnected, cosmopolitan, and he published this 1 year in 24, and surely he has the data. He didn't discuss the issue in a review regarding the Phoenician come si dice, colonization of West, not Sardinia, West Mediterranean. And another issue, then, who were the Carthaginians? Ancient DNA study revealed standing out, and so on. No, this mounting. And I was expecting, waiting for a reaction from the archaeological world. But I don't know. Third, in the same paper, the information is they are not Levantine, but who were. The inheritor of Levantine Phoenician culture derived most of their ancestry from a genetic profile similar to that of Sicily and the Aegean. They are Minoic. The same gene profile of and again also the information was already available by archaeology, linguistic, and so on, but the proof that also Cypriotic population are the same or very, very similar gene profile, and also the Philistines. We know that they were from the Sea peoples, and maybe is the only evidence, genomic evidence, that Philistines were of the Aegean phenotype. Again, in Sicily, the same, in the east part, in the west part, before the Greek colonization of later colonization. So we have that very, very simplified scheme. Neolithic Aegean, Minoic, you see, they have not a steppe, and come si dice, Mycenaean had the steppe, so they changed the Doric history and so on. And Cypriot, you see the same, very similar genotype. So it may be that after the lock collapse, the Aegean, as we discussed, I heard about that, were the most affected region in the Mediterranean, probably because they were in the center of the link of this common market of the pre-collapse Mediterranean, and then they disappeared. No, they spread in Cyprus, the Philistines, in Sicily, and in Carthago. The North Africa people is a mixture of the EEF, the farmers from the Gibraltar, from Iberia, these Greek Aegean people, and the Berbers that are the original. And this Ringbauer, that was the first name in the paper, does this mean Phoenician culture was like a franchise? What's franchise? We have to give matter to this very interesting word. And we have a mechanism very similar in another example is the Etrusci in the Iron Time age. If you go in the Rome Museum, you see the tombs from the cities in Etruria, but also there is a very big collection of things not very clearly separated, and you feel to be in Athens. There are more Greek samples in Rome in this museum than in Athens Museum, because the importation was so huge that it is very relevant. And in the same tomes you can find a lot of things from Greek, from Cyprus, from Sardinia, and so on. So is a very, very wide demonstration of the globalization in the Iron Time, is not before. And nobody may effort to define Etrusci as a Greek colony. No? Who? The same is in Sardinia. So, in the museum, the Tomba Etrusca, 7th century, you see Greek things, Phoenician style pottery. They are not original, they are made in Etruria, and the Greek pottery imitation. So they produced, imported, and made all this. If you go in Sulci, in Sant'Antioco, the island in Sardinia, you can find similar things, a mix of things, especially in the deepest region of the excavation. You cannot find a pure Phoenician pottery. You find a mixture where Phoenician pottery is the minority. You can find the Greek, you can find Cypriotic imitation, and Sardinian pottery made in the style of Greek and of Phoenician pottery. This is, you can see, I just photographed the last week to demonstrate this strange thing. So the red slip, your studies, archaeologists, demonstrate that this paste is compatible with local geology. From the beginning, if you are a Phoenician going to conquer and found foundation, make the foundation of a new city, you have your things. You don't produce there with the hybrid forms. You follow your project, and in the maybe this old lady could be in right, defining the Phoenician idea over followed by, maybe for a simplification, because all was dark in comparison to the east. It was filled with the oriental looks. So if you find a lot of Phoenician things, and if you have biblical or Greek historians that describe this, and now ask the our friend. Uh, these cities were colonized, were founded, were foundations. Now, in all the museums, the description for tourists and so on, you find the foundation, colonization, there is no doubt. So the question I was talking about at the beginning, may we not change the paradigm just like that? No, because genomics but just to begin to change the idea, and many data and conclusion from the Sardinian archaeologist is in that way. Stiglitz and Valdomel, they have a new idea. There is not a colonization, it is a mix, is a franchising. But what does it mean? It's not so simple. Sulci was founded by Phoenicians in the 8th, I think, the 8th century. There was Nuraghe with a village, and then the new Phoenician city. And all those Sardinians were finished. They are there. Because after this international market that was risen after the collapse, 1 century, they organized, they were resilient and could enjoy a situation of self-consistency where the market was sufficient for them and they could send metals to Cyprus and so on, and they needed a new port, a new city, and the women in Sulci, when the husband said, I want made a house like my grandfather with the hut, with the women, they know. We know that now the houses are modern. So a downtown was constructed as at that time style and project. And in fact, there you can find Nuragic style pottery, mixed pottery, a very, very few original things from Tiro, maybe nothing, and Carthaginian things. So maybe this colonization is not so real, can be defined as a Phoenician lake, no, not anymore. There is an asymmetry. You have myths, history, very ancient, we can forget, and some construction of the politicians. Napoleon III paid for excavations in Lebanon and so on. They linked with the Maronites, or Maronites, I don't know, Maronites, because of political pressure to define a colonization model compatible. Then there was a Italian amplification, because very, very clever archaeologists found a lot of things, and they observed a large part of Punic things. But Punic things are centuries after that period, the beginning of the pre-colonization, that to me is the main point to be studied in deep. So they confirmed the Phoenician colonization model because Carthago was considered as Phoenician from Tyre. Also the myths, but why the Carthaginians needed this Phoenician history? Because they were a growing society and they needed a blasone, a medal, a storytelling, something very good, as Romans needed to be Enea, Troy. No, the foundation of Rome was very, very noble and linked to the gods. Similar things can be hypothesized for the North African people changing their status from poor to rich in combination with Sardinian, Iberian, and so on, making this new market. And they needed a medal, they needed goats, they needed many things. The Sardinian, to be colonized, should have been res nullius, but I listened to the wonderful lesson from Professor, and we know that the Sardinia was still in good position. They stopped to produce nuraghi, but they changed this paper from Yalongo. I just read this, and they changed, they clothed some nuraghi, and Professor described the similar things, and new town-like villages were constructed near Barumini and other points. The architecture was very refined, so was not res nullius, was a very relevant civilization still that time, so that the new market can be hypothesized with the Greeks destroyed, Cyprus going well, you described, and the links between the pre-collapse links between Cyprus and that market were re-established very powerful. I just reconstruct by fantasy, but on the ground of observation and data you produced and I read. Probably I took the point that I needed, but this can be really a good point. Sardinian and Carthago. This paper is very interesting. The studied the pottery found in the ground of Carthago, and you see 38% Sardinian, 0.9 Sardinian, 8.3 Levante, 74. So, is Carthago a Phoenician foundation? It suggests that Sardinian helped the first steps of Carthago. Maybe they had similar languages because the links were common. So the link with Cyprus, and we heard about this link with we saw a lot of information regarding this in your very good talks. And Sardinian things have been found there, and so on. With the Etrusci is a very easy way to describe this, and Professor De Palmas published on this, and this ship is in Etruria, very prestigious, and this is a very interesting thing. In the foundation level of this city in Etruria, they found a ship and sword as religious, as gifts in the foundation. We know by the Roman foundation ceremony that in Etruria the ceremony of foundation follow with very strict ceremonial procedures, so that this means that as Carthago, also the foundation of Etruscan cities were linked with Sardinia, with Nuragic people, and the well-known links with the Sardinian in the tombs, female tombs, this is another one. Another good point to me is this one. The Tophet is the Phoenician cemetery of before the kill, sacrifice, and so on. The story of sacrifice has been delayed, contradicted by many studies. The Toffets are all around North Africa. The first one was in Cartagena and in Sardinia in the same age. You can see the distribution, statistical, very sophisticated, are organized like that. The interesting that in Lebanon, in the coast, there is no evidence of Tophet, nothing. They used a different type of sepulchral procedures, and someone says no evidence is no demonstration of no existence. But the Tophet is not a ring or a vase. Is a structure that probably now that all is destroyed by the war, but the evidence of such big things, the absence is evidence and not existence, and so on. And in the first level, 8th century of the Tophet in Sulci, you can find pottery with the Sardinian. And the top is Phoenician style, but is made in Sardinia. So also this Tophet story is absolutely against a foundation. And you can see at the level of the deepest level, things from roads and so on, together with the Sardinian things. And from where comes this Tophet story? In all the places in the Mediterranean, the babies were not linked, seppelliti, come si dice, in the same cemeteries as adult. And also in Roman, also in Greece. So it's not Levantine procedure. The procedure of using vessels with cremate, come si dice cremato? It was in practice in Etruria. So maybe the idea was linked to that, and so on. The gods, Tanit, Balhamon, are very in the Punic period. Anyway, Tanit is a Egyptian Berber goddess. Astarte is very late in the Punic civilization. So no gods, no Tophet, no pottery. The towns could be interpreted as evolution of a new need for the commercial network in that West common market. Also in Etruria, you have the evolution from the huts to a new way of making. So, in this idea of the Western Mediterranean network linked to Cyprus in particular, could be a surviving model to explain the resilience after the collapse. The tragedy is that Carthaginian, as typical French do sometimes, became more richer, power, and then began to fight with the Greek peoples. They make the community with Etruscan battles, wars, and so on, and they ate the Sardinia, and not invited, but changed something, and then the Romans and so on. So we lack the period from the collapse, the changes in the organization of Sardinia, the birth of this community, and then the evolution against toward the Roman and so on. And that is finished. I finished. just a model. And the model needs experiments, pro and against, with the proper type of discussion, and we need more samples from the paleogenomics. And my fear is that these studies are expensive, difficult, few people can do properly. The pre-experimental is very complex, and maybe no people want to study and publish not in Nature, because the second, third confirming papers cannot be proposed to the same journals. So, oh,
Thank you so much.
okay.
Very interesting. And no, just a couple of points. Okay. Thank you so much. It was very interesting. And yeah, just a couple of points. First, of course, I'm very happy of the fact that we don't have the Phoenician DNA signature, because the Phoenicians is our invention, as I already said. We are using, when we say Phoenician, we use a Greek word that the Greeks used to describe people in the Levant. And they didn't even give a geographic delimitation of this. They just said, oh, these are the Phoenicians. But the point is this: we start to call them Phoenicians in the Iron Age, but these are just the people who were there before in the Bronze Age, the Canaanites, which is also a term that we gave them. And so the same people who were there in the Bronze Age continue in the Iron Age. And the fact that they are mixed genetically was also not a big surprise, because they were already genetically mixed in the Bronze Age. Because the network that Eric showed before, you know, when you have in the late Bronze Age all these connections in the Aegean, this is a network of people moving, not only objects. So the Levant, since the Bronze Age, had been a mixed area genetically. So I'm not surprised that when you are looking for the Phoenician signature, you don't find it. Because I guess the next study would be to study the Bronze Age more thoroughly and to demonstrate, look, they were mixed in the Bronze Age genetically in the Levant, so they were mixed genetically in the Iron Age, and therefore when they move into the Mediterranean, you don't find the Phoenician signature, because the Phoenicians is our creation, basically. But there is a point. So from this, it's not fair, I think, to completely remove the Levantine or the Phoenician injection into the Mediterranean because of language. The Punic language is a Semitic language, and it's a West Semitic language, and you have inscriptions in Carthagena or in other places. It means that if you have language, so language doesn't go with DNA, right? Like material culture, yeah? So, fine. But if you are speaking a Semitic language, your mother, your father were speaking this Semitic language. You know, language is a conservative fossil, so it takes generations to change. So it means that there is, of course, a Levantine presence in the Iron Age Mediterranean, and if they left the language, it means that this presence was quite important. But of course, it doesn't not mean that it was a genetic influx or But so I think it should be considered DNA and language and material culture, because there is the influence of the material culture. All together. Also, the point is that the genetic data that they showed about the Phoenicians goes from the 6th century onwards. But the arrival of the Levantine people into the Mediterranean, starts with the 9th century, let's say. So I don't know, I'm not a genetist, but it's possible that from the 9th century onwards, it gets more diluted, and maybe some parts of the DNA they disappear through recombination, and therefore when you arrive in the 6th century, it's already super mixed, But now I'm not a genetist, but I'm saying that Tyre start their colonization, let's say, in the 9th century, but the genetic data is from the 6th century. So there is a difference. But I don't know. I mean, I'm totally fine.
Perfect.
But it's funny. I find it interesting the fact that you are now fighting against a ghost, which is the Phoenician, which we invented. Okay, so this is important to say.
To me, the problem is not to fight against Tiro, because we know Tiro what it was, the relevance. The problem is explaining this, if merchant from the Tiro went at the beginning and so on, is not relevant to that reality. That is completely different from quoting the Sardinian towns as foundations, because foundation is foundation. If the Italian went to New York, you find Italians there, and they eat pizza. Uh, uh, okay, and don't forget Cyprus, because Cyprus were of Aegean genotype, but they had a town that was Phoenician. Unfortunately, the genome in that town was not studied. It could be very important, relevant, because might be the first Greek city changing the idea, the software, no? And the also why from Tiro they went in that age in those very distant places to change small gold things and perfumes and so on for Nuragic kings that were not existent. No, they gave lead, piombo, and silver, and so on, in change of what? So commercially, economically, the link of this colonization should be studied. So my idea is not change the paradigm, change everything. No, I am not against Tiro and so on. I'd like to understand what happened. And the dark provided by the remotion of the West, because they were Phoenician colonies, is a mistake, is a non-conformity, because scientifically we have many clues falsifying this idea, and we should analyze deeply, scientifically, with no bias in the mind. So if you question this in the museum in Tarros and in Cagliari, they kill you. Oh, what about? Oh, no, it's not possible.
Just to make things even more interesting, in my opinion, but I don't know. So, Central Mediterranean is one thing.
Okay, champagne.
So, just to make things more complicated, connecting to the Tophet, the Tophet is also a biblical hallucination. People just love to say the Tophet and fine, but of course there is no Tophet in the Near East, in the Levantine coast, never existed, and so on. But the Tophet only appears in Central Mediterranean. There is no Tophet in southern Spain. Mm-hmm. And so, what if the Phoenicians in southern Spain? Because in southern Spain, look, there are a lot of objects, including calcite alabaster objects with Egyptian inscriptions that surely were brought there by the Phoenicians. Because you find the same objects also in the Phoenician towns, okay? So, and these are like not pottery, these are alabaster stone vessels and so on with inscriptions. Actually, in southern Spain, you find the highest number of alabaster vessels with Egyptian inscription outside Egypt. And you find them in Almuñeca and so on in the 8th century onwards. And they also bear inscriptions which are actually older than the 8th century, fine. But because you find them also in the Phoenician cities, so in the Levantine cities, and also in Assyria, of course, because the Assyrian kings in this case were very kind to tell us we took these vessels from Sidon, from Tyre, and we brought them to Assyria. And not the same that you have in Spain. So it's possible that the Levantine, the Phoenicians, were more active in some areas, like in southern Spain, and maybe in the central Mediterranean, so Sardinia and Sicily, it was more the influence from Carthagena. because the Tophet could be something that was invented in Carthage. I don't
Yes.
know. But you know, so
Yes.
it could be because you have Tophets in that area, in Central Mediterranean, but not at the extremities of the Mediterranean. But I don't know. I
Okay.
mean, this is just an idea.
But if I could falsify, why you think that the original thing found in Iberia was brought by? Why the Greek pottery is found in Etruria? Greek brought there? No. Someone brought there, merchant around the Mediterranean. So the evidence of a pottery is not evidence of who brought that. So maybe in Iberia they liked very much that stuff. So I don't think that in that time, with those vessels from Tiro to Iberia, with the currents, we would make all that turnover like that. And with the pirates, no? Etruscan pirati were famous to be pirates. The Sardana were pirates, but pirates have not the helmet, la divisa. I pirati hanno l'occhio bendato, no? the black eye. So probably they were pirates because they defended and patrolled the relevant locations, the Sardinian block, the Iberian block, and so on. If a Greek unknown vessel went, they asked, "Who are you?" and so on. So I am a pirate for you, and so on. So if you find Greek things in Sardinia, why you cannot define Greek people as the bringer? No, they were not. They're Phoenician. Why? So I know that you may be right, as I may be right. The problem is understand who really brought those things. That is not easy. But the genomic is not a weak point, because okay, they can be diluted and so on. The language is very late. It's in Punic period that the alphabet was used. And the language can change or can be used for this telephone is mine. The only words in inscription in Etruria, this brick is mine. But it's not the language. So, yes, but you are centuries late. So my point is that we had to study the pre-colonization from the collapse to the 6th century. Okay, stop, but otherwise. Mi avvicino io? Ah no.
Okay, see, sorry. No, I want to serve only a thing about, you speak about North Africa, no? I think it's very interesting case of study because some important sites as Carthago, also Utica, no? Utica is a Phoenician foundation, but is important that in Carthago and also in Utica, nobody know the local substrate, the local apport of the population. They don't know how are the houses, yes, the pottery, there is a lot of pottery. In Utica, there are a lot of local pottery they don't study, but study the few shards of Levantine pottery there is, but it's not. Is fewer. Sardinian maybe are more than Phoenician, than Levantine pottery, also Iberian pottery, also Villanovan pottery, but the are, are amount incredible of local pottery. Oh, they don't study the local substrate. I think it's very difficult to understand the contact. Also in Carthago, there are a lot, they don't know the shape of the houses. They don't know nothing about the local population. It's impossible that someone arrived from the sea and now I'm here and this is my city. No, there are local population. You need the permission to stay there and to live together with the local. So I think this problem may be in Sardinia. In theory, we know very well, but maybe for some region, the south, the Sulcis, we don't know so well the settlement, the local settlement, and also the local around the houses and the Phoenician square houses is a legend, because in this time, in the 19th century and the 18th century, local population also in Sardinia have square houses. So it's I think we also in Iberia Peninsula, because in the Iron Age a lot of scholars, Phoenician Punic scholars, studied these phases, this time. So they don't know the local production, they don't know, they ignorano completamente. So I think we grow up with the knowledge if we start to study very, very well the local substrate. And to finish, the Phoenician tombs of Taros, now the DNA said that North African are not Phoenician, are not from the Levant, are from yes. North Africa, from Maghreb.
That's how the Tophet also.
Yes.
The main problem is the confusion between Phoenician and Punic. They're different things, completely. So, and they changed and alimentated each other. So finding the Tophet, which is Punic, so is Phoenician. If you go to the museum, all the red slip things are defined as Phoenician. But yeah, if you study the impast, they are not. So.
But I think also speaking about the red slip pottery, that's also another thing, because even in the Levant itself, there is a problem of defining Phoenicia, because there is an article some years ago by Gunnar. So if you just take all the red slip pottery, you find most of it in Cilicia. So north of what we define as Phoenicia. So most of the red slip pottery in the Levant is outside Phoenicia. So this is fine. Now, to me, okay, to make me happy, I would say that there are Levantine people around in the Mediterranean. I cannot say they weren't, but of course these are one of the actors that were around, together with all the other people, included in Sardinia. But I cannot still think that all people from Byblos and Tyre, they never left, across the sea. This is because
they needn't. They needn't.
Yeah, but they were, Tyre and Byblos in the Iron Age, they are still very rich cities. Super rich.
Of course.
So they must have...
That's why maybe they needn't.
So maybe, I agree with the fact that we have exaggerated a lot the Phoenician presence, and we have really considered the Phoenicians only merchants. And this is why, for example, no one studies grinding stones in Phoenicia. The Phoenicians didn't basically make food. you find no publication about grinding stones because why? Because the Phoenicians are considered only sea people, people across the sea, so they don't they don't do agriculture. This is also strange. So there are a lot of preconceptions about the Phoenicians that we need to dismantle. But I still would say that someone left the country to go into the Mediterranean.
I am not an archaeologist, so I can agree with you that some level.
But maybe some of the many actors. Yeah, as you said, it's difficult to tell who was bringing objects around.
They provided the software, that's sure.
Yeah, maybe. There are also ships. We have the ships represented by the Assyrians, the Phoenician ships, and also across the period, throughout the Achaemenid period, the Phoenicians are always the sailors. They consider, so they clearly had the know-how to cross the Mediterranean. This is for sure because we know this. So I think this was not a problem to them.
Okay. Thank you.
So just the last thing. I don't know if it's relevant or, but just to follow on this idea that language can travel with relatively few people, or the composition, genetic composition of populations can change while the language remains. Let's think of Alghero, where the population has been, studied pretty well. They are now just undistinguishable from Sardinians from the other towns, but they still speak Catalan. So when there is a language that has prestige, then people will tend to speak that, even if their origin is just from wherever. It can be North Africa, it can be Iberia, it can be Sardinia, it can be Barbagia, and they will speak Phoenician.
Allora, volevo dire una cosa riguardo al Tophet, una mia fantasia, visto che, come abbiamo visto anche ieri alla tomba dei giganti di Sadum e Sorku, Desi ha detto che era usanza dei nuragici, almeno da quel poco che si è potuto studiare, che i bambini non venivano messi dentro la tomba, ma al di fuori della tomba, i bambini al di sotto degli 8 anni. Quindi perché non pensare che magari fosse un'usanza sarda che poi si è evoluta con l'influenza di altri popoli?
Was a general use in many places. Till the Romans used the dentition, the teeth output as a linen. So it's common, and also in other places they put the children under the house. It's not very particular. So that the division of the limbo is common. The particular things is to burn and put in these vessels and to stratify. And the icons, the stele, they are very late, and they are different from Carthago and Sardinian stele. The Sardinian stele are iconic frequently. They show the images of gods or people, maybe grandmother style with the position. In North Africa, they were aniconic always. They had sometimes the god, the Tanit, but very late, and the 3rd century, something like that, and the Trinity, 3 Betili, and so on. So this different show that they were a common use, but with personalized styles. And this is again other champagne. This against the original idea from the Eastern, because the religious things are conserved very strictly. You cannot colonize a place and you make iconic or anachronic. I use the Sardinian pottery. In holy things, people are conservative usually. So the Tophet is a very interesting experiment to be studied, but surely is not Tiro derived, absolutely. Okay?
If I may add one thing, I'm not sure about the evidence for giants' tombs because I remember the giants' tombs and children not being buried. Sedda Sakabdeba is the only one where there is a separate, collector for infants. But in the majority of other tombs, that I can remember, there are possibly fewer children, but probably because of the preservation of the bones, they tend to preserve less. But there are examples of infants and even fetuses, of course, that would be against the argument, but definitely children a few years old, they are present in most giants' tombs that have been excavated well. So they were actually burying, for the most part, everyone, the whole community was being buried there, with this strange exception of Sedda Sagaudeba, where there is even like a small, like a small cyst that's next to the tomb.
Vabbè.
So